Welcome back, folks, to another Archetype review. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be covering the Assassin Archetype from the Advanced Player's Guide. The Assassin Archetype, to the surprise of probably nobody, is all about striking people from the shadows and making sure that their targets will absolutely die. While it is certainly good at that job, I do feel like I need to say up front that I'm going to be a bit more critical in this video than I've been in any other video of mine. In its current state, the Assassin has a bit of a problem with it, and its playstyle will generally clash with the classic sort of dungeon crawl. In a more free-flowing sort of campaign, where you can choose your targets and combats carefully, and you can prepare for them more ahead of time rather than just opening a door and starting combat and rolling for initiative, it will shine a lot better. Though you can still make it work in a dungeon crawl sort of campaign with a bit of work on your end. Without further complaining, without, talking about the feats themselves, let's just get into those. The Assassin Dedication becomes available at level 2, and it actually has a lot of prerequisites. You have to have the Alchemical Crafting feat from the crafting skill, and you have to be trained in crafting, deception, and stealth. These are all pretty safe things to have though, since they are all going to be important skills for being an assassin, and crafting and alchemical crafting are required because, yeah, there's a lot of poison-based abilities in this archetype, so you kind of have to know how poisons work to be able to take those feats. The only ability that you actually get for taking this dedication is the Mark for Death activity. For 3 whole actions, you select someone that you can see and hear, and you now focus on their movements and focus on killing them. Until they die or you mark someone else, you get a variety of benefits against them. You get a +2 circumstance bonus on perception checks to seek them and deception checks to feint towards them, and also, weapons and unarmed attacks with the Agile and Finesse trait get the Backstabber and Deadly D6 traits whenever you are attacking them specifically. If your weapon already has the Deadly trait, then you just increase the Deadly die instead of giving it another Deadly trait. You can't have multiple of those. I have 2 issues with Mark for Death. First off, 3 actions is super expensive in combat. It basically will take a full turn away from you to mark a target, and then that only marks a single target, so if you're fighting multiple people, you're gonna run into a huge action sink. While you can mark targets outside of combat, that is going to require scouting ahead of the party if you want to do it outside of combat, and that is not always going to be achievable. Yes, you can, get a mirror and look around a corner at someone or sneak into a room, but if you fail on a stealth check, then you've just started the combat early. My second issue with it is that the actual benefits of marking someone are not nearly good enough to justify spending 3 actions. Getting a +2 bonus on 2 skills is nice and all, but the bonus on your attacks is really not that good. If you're looking to use an Agile and Finesse weapon that has the Backstabber and has the Deadly trait, you could just use a War Razor. I know that War Razors are martial weapons, but they have all 4 of those traits, except that the Deadly die is actually larger. I know it's a martial weapon, but the point of spending 3 actions to get 2 weapon traits that aren't actually hugely impactful is not very good in my opinion. I personally see 2 ways that you could resolve this. First, you could make Mark for Death easier to apply. As an example, you could let someone observe clues that someone left behind to mark them, like how rangers can hunt prey by tracking someone. Or you can just basically rip it straight from the investigator and allow them to mark a target by studying up on them. Think about it. If you are hiring someone to be an assassin to kill someone, they can just study up on them beforehand to learn about the way that they operate, and then mark them for death. It still won't help in a dungeon crawl sort of environment, but it's super flavorful and just makes sense. The other way that you can make Mark for Death easier to apply is to just reduce it to a 2-action activity, which would generally be the simplest option and would work best for a dungeon crawl. I would experiment with this and see whatever works best for your campaign and whatever you guys like the most. The other route that you could take to make this feat a bit better would be to just improve the benefits. You could allow the +2 circumstance bonus to apply to stealth checks to hide and sneak, or you could, and this is a lot more questionable, you could apply the fatal trait instead of the deadly trait, though in that case you would have to make sure that you can't have the deadly and fatal trait on the same weapon. This would help make the 3 action cost in combat a lot more worth it to apply. And honestly, I don't actually know why the +2 circumstance bonus doesn't already apply to stealth checks. Like, that just makes sense to me. I feel like it should already do that, and that would just make the feat good enough to actually justify using. When it comes down to it though, I am not a game designer, and I have not actually played with the Assassin archetype, so you should take my suggestions as what they are, which are blind suggestions from someone who has a bit of experience with the system, but not all that much with this specifically. So if you want to play an assassin, then take this archetype and talk to your GM about it, and then see whether or not you want there to be changes made, and if you do make changes, then feel free to just change them as necessary to whatever feels right for the flavor of the ability. It is only a second level feat, so it shouldn't be too powerful. Following up on that incredibly complicated mess, Expert Backstabber is incredibly simple. It doubles the precision damage that is done by the Backstabber trait on weapons. You now deal 2 precision damage to flat-footed targets, or 4 precision damage to flat-footed targets once you get a +3 potency. This is an alright increase to your damage, but this is going to be increasing your damage by 1 or 2, considering that you're going to be using a backstabbing weapon, and 1 or 2 doesn't amount to a huge amount, especially as you level up. As your strength modifier improves and you get weapon specialization, small little modifiers to your damage are a lot less impactful than they really seem like they should. It's still a nice bonus to get, but only if you use a backstabber weapon constantly and you can reliably get people flat-footed. In that case, it will add up over the course of many attacks, but it is a little bit situational. The poison resistance feat is actually available to alchemists and druids, and it's a great boost to your defenses. You now have a constant sort of resilience against toxins, giving you a poison resistance equal to half your level, and you also get a +1 circumstance bonus against poisons. Poisons don't come up all that often, if I'm being entirely honest, but it might depending on your campaign. If you're fighting against a bunch of snakes or just poisonous things, then it might come up a lot if it's a theme over the course of a campaign. But some campaigns, it's just not going to come up very much at all, and some, it's going to be coming up constantly. Whenever poison does come up, though, being able to resist it is insanely good, because poisons can be really scary. Also, a lot of creatures that use poison often rely on it to deal a lot of damage, so you'll be great at kicking their ass since you'll be resisting a lot of the damage that they deal. The surprise attack feat is literally just the surprise attack class feature from a rogue. Whenever you roll deception or stealth on an initiative roll, any creatures that haven't acted whenever you act are flat-footed against you for that round. This is a nice way to get some people flat-footed, but it isn't going to be the most reliable method, since it relies on you rolling well for initiative, which simply is not going to happen all the time. There are just going to be some times where you roll below 5 and all the enemies roll above a 15. That is just going to happen, but this is a nice thing to have for whenever, you kind of need it. So it's a nice passive bonus to have, and it's a good reason to roll stealth or deception for initiative, but it isn't going to be a huge game-changing sort of ability. It'll just change up your mindset for the first round of combat. Poison Weapon is a rogue feat that honestly is a little bit underwhelming for my taste. As an action, whenever you're using a piercing or slashing weapon, you draw a poison and apply it to your weapon. If you attack with the weapon and hit, then it applies that poison, assuming that it's a contact or injury poison, which it had better be, since hitting someone with an inhaled poison or something that they have to eat is a bit silly. This is nice and all, but the feat also gives you access to a number of simple poisons that deal 1d4 damage every day equal to your level. This basically means that you can add 1d4 poison damage to your damage rolls a number of times per day equal to your level. Unfortunately, that damage is super low and won't amount to a very huge amount, and you'll still waste your poison if you critically miss with your attack. I wish that this poison damage was persistent, but that might be a bit too good. This is a great feat if you have access to a bunch of other poisons though, so if you have an alchemist in your party that is fine hooking you up with a bunch of really dangerous poisons, then this is substantially better. But if you're just using this to apply the 1d4 poison damage, then it is nothing special. The Sneak Attacker feat is ripped straight out of the Rogue multiclass archetype, and it's a nice boost to your damage. You get the Sneak Attack from the Rogue class, but it only deals 1d4 damage, which increases to 1d6 at level 6. But this is, a level 6 feat for the Assassin, when it's a level 4 feat for the Rogue multiclass archetype, so it basically is just 1d6 damage. This doesn't scale as you level up, and it basically just increases your damage by 1d6, since you're already going to be seeking out flat-footed targets anyway to get the extra damage from a Backstabber weapon. Getting 1d6 more damage is going to add up over the course of a campaign, and it is pretty dang helpful. Unless you are a rogue, of course, since in that case, this feat does literally nothing for you, since you already have the better scaling version of Sneak Attack. For everyone else, this is great though, since, yeah, you want to be attacking flat-footed targets regardless, and it will be adding up damage over time, and yeah, 1d6 is always good to add, and who doesn't like rolling more dice? The Angel of Death feat is a very, very specific ability that really lines up with the idea of an assassin in a world full of magic that will get in the way of you killing people, and it allows for you to take some of precautions against that magic. All of your attacks that are made against a creature that you have used Mark for Death on now have the death trait, meaning that if you reduce someone to 0, they are instantly killed rather than bleeding out. Also, if they are killed in this way, then you kill them even harder than normal. If someone tries to communicate with them, bring them back to life, or turn them into undead, the counteract modifier on whatever they're using to do it has to be higher than half of your level, or it fails. Also, you can bypass this with an artifact, or if a deity intervenes. Basically, if someone tries to raise someone from the dead, they have to use a spell that is of a level higher than half your level. So, you get this at level 10, they have to use a 6th level spell to do it. Essentially, people that you kill are very, very prone to staying dead, and dead men actually can't tell tales. How much use you will get out of this feat greatly depends on your GM, since I don't know how many GMs will think to cast Commune with Dead, or Raise Dead, or Resurrect on people that you kill, because that's a bit situational to do. I mean, I could see it in some cases, but it will depend on your GM, because if they wouldn't use these abilities already, then this feat doesn't really do much. The improved Poison Weapon feat shockingly improves the Poison Weapon feat, increasing the basic poisons that you can make every day to deal 2d4 damage instead of 1d4. Also, if you critically miss, you don't waste a poison on your weapon. This is an alright boost, but 2d4 still isn't a huge amount, especially by level 10. It can be useful, but I still think that this should be persistent damage to make this poison matter. 2d4 damage by this point is really not much at all, and really the Poison Weapon feat is predominantly used to actually apply dangerous poisons. So it's an alright boost to your damage, but it's not anything to write home about. Here we are, the actual assassination ability and the Assassin archetype. Assassinate is one of the more problematic abilities in this whole archetype, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For 2 actions, whenever you have someone marked for death and are completely unnoticed by the target, you can make a strike against them. If you hit, you deal 66 precision damage, and they have to make a basic fortitude save against your class, or spell DC, whichever one's higher. If they critically fail on that saving throw, then they instantly die, but this save does have the incapacitation trait, meaning that people above your level literally are incapable of instantly dying from this ability. Once they make this save, they're then immune for a full day, so you can't attempt to assassinate them again. Now, the issue with this feat is that you're basically never going to run into a creature who has not noticed you at all. The unnoticed condition, which is what you have to be able to use Assassinate, is incredibly hard to get, since it requires that they have no idea that there is a chance that you're present. Like, if you walk into a room completely invisible and make no noise, but they notice that a door opened, you are incapable of assassinating them, since they know that something weird is up in the air. As long as they are remotely aware of your presence, you cannot use this ability on them. Now, I feel that the only fix that this feat needs is that you should be able to be undetected rather than unnoticed. Undetected means that they are aware that someone might be around, but they have no idea where they are. This means that you could use stealth to actually hide and then sneak somewhere to get it, and then you can now use Assassinate on them, and it would actually make Assassinate usable without the GM having to actively work with the player to allow their ability to work. And it would still work if they're unnoticed, because if you're unnoticed, you're also undetected. Essentially, as written, you're hardly ever going to be able to use this on someone. So fixing that is very, very nice. As for the ability itself, it's pretty good. 66 damage is pretty alright, especially at level 12. And while they do get a basic fortitude save, it's still a lot of damage. Also, if you critically hit them, then that 66 is also doubled, I think. With the one fix that I'm suggesting that you homebrew in here, then I feel like this ability would work great. And I think that allowing it to be used more often isn't too overpowered, since you already have to mark them for death and then spend 2 actions to do it. So this is a minimum of a 5 action ability, which I'm fine making a 5 action ability actually have a chance to be used. Overall, I feel like the Assassin archetype is so close to being great, but it's not quite there. I feel like it works really well for the concept that it's putting down, but it's not quite scary enough in my mind to justify having a feat called Angel of Death. I don't feel like any of my proposed changes would make the archetype too strong, since it would still require a lot of setup to make it work, but if your GM vetoes them, then the archetype would still function just fine. You're just going to have to put in a bit more work to make sure that your abilities will get their time to shine. It's a very fun archetype, and there's a reason why assassin sort of characters are pretty popular. It's a fun idea, it's a fun way to play, and yeah, it's a good archetype, and it does get my seal of approval. It's just, it might need a little bit of tweaking, but who doesn't like to do a little bit of tweaking? Thanks for watching and getting to the end of the video. This has been a video that I've been wanting to make for a while now, since it's an archetype that, as you can probably notice, I have some issues with, but I feel has a lot of promise. I hope that I've been able to convey that I really do think that this is a good archetype if you put in a little bit of work, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on the video and my proposed ideas. Do you think that the issues I pointed out are actually big enough to justify homebrewing? Do you think that my proposed ideas would break the game? I would love to know down below. Liking, commenting, and subscribing are the best ways to help out my channel, so if you want to help me, then that would be really appreciated, and as always, I would love to hear any constructive criticism that you have down below. Until I see you next, live a wonderful life.